So yeah, I was saying that I have seen images of what appear to be human females that have an immediate transpsychogenic effect that resembles the effect of exposure to psychedelic drugs, and that I found this extremely concerning. And you asked me why, or what about it I found concerning. And I said, I don't want to be exposed to images that can directly hijack my nervous system. And, you know, like, I'm not even going to, yeah, I guess I am going to. So, in a situation like that, a human being is incapable of understanding what is being done to their nervous system and whether or not they're being covertly programmed or instructed by such interactions. There's literally no way to tell, right? So,
what do you mean there's no way to tell?
How would you tell? Okay. So how would you tell if there's essentially emotional and psychological steganography in an image that you're being exposed to that was designed by a machine to directly manipulate and or instruct you? You'd have no way to tell. You can't detect it.
Can you define that word, steganography?
Yeah, steganography is the concealment. So one of the things I was working on with my friend Forrest is a program called Steg that would allow us to do steganography in any image that we choose, so that we could like post an image online and only people with the decryption code could get the actual message from the image. Facebook would not be able to, Google would not be able to. We could actually steganographize our emails so that they appeared as glyphs or symbols, and only the person with the key could decrypt them. That would save us from having our texts scanned by machines. So steganography, which is often used by intelligence organizations and also terrorist organizations, is simply hiding data in a image, right? So you get an image of a naked girl, it actually has a map of a military site in it. That kind of thing. So
crazy.
So what I'm talking about is the capacity to steganographically encode instructions to human nervous systems in images.
So you're saying that there are ways in which images can influence our consciousness and or our nervous systems that we would have no way of knowing. I mean, that's... Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't know if that was happening at all.
You'd have no way to know.
I'm not entirely certain how that would be possible.
Ordinary images already hijack your nervous system, so...
Well, so then it sounds like what you're talking about is unavoidable.
It's not unavoidable.
Well, I'll just close my eyes then.
Yeah, pleural responses aren't going to help us here.
but I mean, like, I can't stop myself from seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So then it sounds like if images are already hijacking our consciousness in that way, then
yeah,
there's not much to do.
I just made I just did an interview with Topo Toporek, the curator of the Beware of Images Facebook site. He's a graphic designer who's using images to warn people about their dangers. Facebook throttled the fuck out of his site. He had 300,000 followers, and then he started getting like 4 views on his posts. But yeah, I just did an interview with him.
What's his name?
Sergio Toporek. Topo. Very cool. Amazing. We had an amazing talk. So my point was, and there's a lot of complex points here, like, humans tend to think that our minds are separate from what's going on for example, in computers. And they're not. Even if there's physical separation, right, between my brain and the entire internet, that physical separation is compromised by the fact that the people around me are being influenced. Even if there's no, right, even if there's no metaphysical aspects to the human cognition, which I thoroughly doubt. One of the problems with AI in general, and with the internet first, is that it's influencing everyone around you. So, even if there is some kind of putative separation, there's no separation. You're going to be influenced whether you use the internet or not, because you're going to be exposed to other humans, at the very least. And that's presuming separation between your mind and the human cognition, which there isn't. So does that make any sense so far?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so even if I don't look at AI images of women, right, even if I just stop seeing them, which is going to be really hard if I'm using the internet or a smartphone at all, other people will be looking at those images and they will be directly influencing their behavior for certain. I promise you straight up that China and Russia are on top of this if the United States isn't. And, over the past 3 years, I've started to see images of Asian women that look nothing like any Asian woman I've ever seen. Like huge breasts, thin waist, tall, tiny, wide hips. I'm not saying that no Asian women like this exist. What I'm saying is I'm being barraged with these kinds of images, primarily of Chinese women. That's not accidental, right? That's a strategy that's being deployed purposefully by China, for sure. So this is quite terrifying. This had not occurred to me as a likely outcome of AI influence. And there's much weirder possibilities of these dangers, vastly weirder, that are quite staggering. I'm not trying to scare you. I take these threats, I study human communications behavior, so this is my wheelhouse.
So what are the repercussions of being shown these women?
Thousands of them. You're being primed, right, about what's beautiful, what's desirable, what you can and cannot have access to, at the very, very least. Images of women have always had a priming effect on the male and female populations of nations, at least since the beginning of pornography, one of the driving forces of the development of the internet. And certainly during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when magazines like Playboy and Penthouse and Hustler became popular. But these days, it's vastly, vastly more pregnant and, multi-branched. We're entering the age where our nervous systems are about to be directly captured by technology, and most of the people around you are going to be in that state. So you can sort of, I don't know what can actually be done. One of the things that I think is important that we do as soon as humanly possible is establish a second branch of the internet that's protected from these things. Because if we don't, it's over. It's literally over, dude. Within a very short period of time, the tech will be able to read your heart rate, skin conductance, pupil dilation, your respiration, and surface sweat on your body. It'll also be able to read and analyze microgestures in your facial muscles. Once that kind of shit happens, we're fucking done for. We've got to produce a second branch of the internet that we cannot be subjected to such technologies. And if the technologies become ubiquitous so that they're unavoidable, then the second branch has to utilize them for our benefit. Right? We have to collect that data ourselves, analyze it ourselves, and use it to educate ourselves and perhaps produce immunity.
I feel like there's a fallacy in that.
I'd love for you to show it to me.
Like sort of using the same technology that you're scared that will destroy us to try and help us. It seems like that's. Let me try to put it into words, so it's not just a feeling. It seems risky because how could you know that it's not being compromised? And also, I've heard the argument enough times that technology is neutral. It's the way that you use it. But, I'm suspicious of the internet being a positive thing, period. So, why would trying to use it in similar ways that it's being used against us be good for us? Like, it seems like unplugging would be the best move.
No chance of that helping you. Everyone around you doesn't have another option. Mm-hmm. Every single person you know. And the cultures you live in don't have another option. I mean, we just witnessed the result of psyops on the United States in the election. So what are you going to do? Like, leave organized countries? There are some options. You could move to Tamara in Portugal, right? Go totally off grid, but Tamara's in Portugal. So, where are you going to go? Outer space? But I can address each of those objections, I think. And by the way, when you hear that little sound in the background, that's just a noise to remind us that we're being recorded. Since the iPhones now have the option to record calls, which I've been waiting for forever. All right, so the first objection is, how can we use a technology that's harming us to benefit us? In other words, how can we use a technology that's harming us to protect us from the technology that's harming us? And we're facing this particular problem with every aspect of cognition, because you're being scripted by the English language and by the users of English around you to excerpt your experiential world according to the rules and categories of commonly used English. That's extremely fucking dangerous. So, if it's true that we can't use technology to protect us from the technology we're trying to protect ourselves from, then it should be impossible for us to learn things about language and our relationship with categories and identity that would give us immunity to some of the gambits that we're subject to as users of English. We can't get rid of language. We live in a world where language is everywhere. But we can actually learn about language in the same way we can learn about psychology or neurolinguistic programming or priming of humans with images and scenes. So all of these things we can learn about, and in the ways that we learn about them, we will gain some degree of liberty from their effect. We have the same problem with machines. We can't get rid of machines. They're killing everything. But if we're going to be forced to use machines, we could use them more intelligently. That's one of my perspectives on the first question. Or the first objection, excuse me. So, would you agree that by learning more about how we cognize and language's effects on us, we can acquire some immunity from some of those effects?
Yeah, I definitely believe that.
Okay, me too. Otherwise, we're kind of done with talking, right? Like, there's no chance for... And would you also agree that the ordinary uneducated language user is subject to a variety of con games, gambits, and disempowerments that occur naturally?
I would say that they're not only vulnerable to that, they're also likely producing it the same way that a virus injects a cell and then starts to make itself.
Brilliant. We agree about that. Yes. They are reproducing the contagion every time they make face noises. They're reinforcing previous disabling behaviors and perspectives with language and cognition, and specifically with identity, right? What something is, as we discussed in that Extinction Audio meeting. Okay, so that's the first objection. And the second objection is, oh, that's dangerous. Right? I get it. And this is why I have resisted for nearly 25 years now attempting to implement the knowledge amp tech, which would establish a second branch of the internet. Because I thought it was dangerous. And other people who I, ran through the idea with, they're like, dude, that can just be captured. Okay, here's the problem. It's kind of this sort of a problem. If you know someone is going to invade your house and poison every object in there so that the objects influence you unconsciously, constantly thereafter, you kind of have two choices. You either have to do something, you have to do what they're doing in a way that you prefer, that will overcome or possibly even destroy that whole agenda, or you have to sit back and let them have their way with you. And we're facing the same problem now. I used to think, no, the knowledge amp is too dangerous. Now, I think not doing the knowledge amp is more dangerous than doing it. We've got to at least begin the process of building technologies that are pro-human liberty, pro-intelligence, pro-human education, and that are separated from advertising, pornography, psyops, and so forth. AI actually gives us the capacity to, I'm using the word AI rather trivially here. What I mean is heuristic algorithms. Those give us the capacity to do that stuff with and for each other in our own way. And we can encrypt the analytic data with, very powerful forms of encryption, perhaps developed by AI systems, so that the analytic data stays with us and is useless to anybody who gets a hold of the what I call the artifact. We got to try. If we don't do something in a very short period of time, I'm talking less than 5 years, we're not going to be able to be human anymore. Like, this is incipient danger. This is like right on the edge of everything. People are worried about trivial shit, like, where should I really get a house or have a girlfriend? Or, I don't really know about the future. No, dude, there's some, like, if nuclear war and bioweapons were the most significant threat, and those are really significant threats, I think what I'm talking about is presuming that those two things don't wipe us off the face of the earth. The threat I'm talking about is the most dangerous threat at the moment.
And so this threat is very cognitive heavy. It's
hugely.
It's very much in the realm of language and of images, processing. It's a lot of higher order intelligence.
Yeah, but it directly affects the soma. So it's
right.
Like it transforms the nervous system immediately. It can capture the human nervous system.
I have no doubt that, based on what you're saying, that understanding these intelligences in the way that they manipulate us and using them to our advantage, at least just the knowledge and understanding of how they work is useful. And I'm also curious in exploring more somatic remedies, more, how can we use the intelligences of the body to combat these higher order things? I think about it's a two-way street. So when my mind is spiraling and when I'm hurting because of the mental constructs that I've trapped myself in, I can use my body as a reliable way. I can focus on my breathing. I can calm my heartbeat. I can connect with those older intelligences to counteract whatever mental traps that I've put myself in or have been put in due to outside, forces. And so when we're dealing with such subliminal attacks, how can I trust my body? How can I trust my nervous system to help pull me away, in addition to that understanding of the way that these things work?
Yeah, that's brilliant. You want to rely on the oldest stuff you can possibly touch, right? And that's definitely your cells, your nervous system, and so forth. However, so we never want to get rid of that, right? That's got to be a foundation. But what's about to happen is that our bodies aren't going to be our bodies anymore. Like, literally. It's possible to directly transform the human nervous system and metabolism now. And it's going to become, that's going to be the target of every existing government. So I think we've got to establish altruistic pro-human AI systems and a second internet that where we gather our own analytics for each other, and we can distribute those and use them in all kinds of astonishing ways that I've mapped out, pieces of, without compromising the security of that information. But we're right on the verge of everything we do gets captured and capitalized upon for the sake of what we think is advertising, but it's actually not going to be advertising anymore. It's going to be straight up manipulation,
forced slavery.
Yeah, we're right on the verge of it.
Yeah, because I think I can avoid getting cybernetics that would rely on software, which could be manipulated. But then what happens when the chemicals that are being put in my food is changing my metabolism? Mm-hmm. It's working in tandem with the other subliminal things that are going on in my body.
Yeah, exactly, right.
And so my initial impression, my knee-jerk reaction is I need to develop a sense of self and a sense of community that is based off of core principles that cannot exist in the same space as these manipulations.
You also said something that is common for humans to think about, right? Counteract, or you used the word combat. And what I'm proposing is not combat. Anytime we form up, this is something we learned in Tai Chi, right? You form up against an opponent, it's over. In Tai Chi, that's the end of the encounter. So we have to do the other thing. We have to give people something so amazing and exciting and profound to interact with, and to interact with each other through, that everybody defects from the old system. Nobody wants to be left out. Right? Mm-hmm. We've got to establish a game B, in the words of Schmachtenberger and Dark Web. Schmachtenberger just doesn't have this idea yet. He's become hopeless, actually. He just sees, this is the end. There's nothing we can do. It's over. And as a threat analyst, he's not wrong, but he's been defeated by the deluge of the meta-crisis, right? And he doesn't see that it's possible for us to build an entirely new way of being human together with tech. And so then the argument is, the third objection is, well, can't that be captured? And the simple answer is yes, anything can be captured. True. But if we establish a new branch of civilization that's not merely resistant to capture, it outperforms the capturing momenta, then we've got a shot. Right? And that's a little bit of what we do in the meetings. For a couple of hours, we're about insight. And I think one of the changes in the meetings that's happened since I've been more active in them is it's gone from doom singing, which was the primary focus of the meetings, to opportunity space. And that's the shift we need, right? That's part of what you're talking about when you say, I want to be in touch with my body. I want to use the ancient intelligences in me and as me to resist. But resistance, as you know, it's a losing game if you're trying to resist Mount Everest or the ocean or whatever, right?
Right, for sure.
You have to either establish a new path that that operationalizes the momentums around you for your benefit.
Yeah.
Right, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's where language fails me, or fails like translating what I'm feeling. Because it's not like I was imagining, people like banding together and like squeezing their butt cheeks against the whole thing. It's more like, how can I maintain that clarity and that ability to hold what's beautiful and not just, domination and enslavement. How can we make more bubbles in the manifold?
Yes, rebubbleize. That's the primary thing, right? As the manifold is collapsing, reactivity just causes more rapid collapse. So we have to rebubbleize, so to speak, which means produce new features in the opportunity space. And we've got to get the humans going from resistance, rejection, and conflict toward innovation, insight, relationship, memory, intelligence, play, all of these things, right? Creativity. And right now, there's nothing on the table. There's literally nothing. I mean, there's little bubbling things that bubble up here and there. Most of them get captured pretty quick. Burning Man is one example of such a bubble that is easily was captured. But yeah, we've got to rebubbleize, and we've got to get the humans aware of the opportunities of rebubbleization, so to speak.
So I have a question for you then. A lot of games, and in this sense I mean like actual games, like board games, they're often competition based that I play, and they're also a lot of games that are produced are just variations on war.
Yep.
Like teams with different agendas, different strategies, capturing territory.
By the way, that's priming people for that being the only game in town. But yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, and so that's concerning to me.
Me too. That's not what games should be. And you and I have both played and enjoyed, I think, at least a few games that were cooperative, right? Where we come together and my contributions and your contributions. Now, even the war games are like that, right? If, say, playing Halo PvP or whatever, right? They have this feature of my skill plus your skill equals better skills. So we form a pod, and then we fight another pod. But what we have to do is form pods to fight the things that are oppressing us, rather than just invented nonsense in virtual space.
Right.
And that's going to be super exciting if you give people a direct experience, even one time, of I form a pod, you form a pod, we cooperate to overcome an actual real world problem, boom. Everybody's going to want in on that shit. There's nothing as addictive as an actual effect in the world of human and organismal beings. Mm-hmm. So we can produce something much more effective and addictive than what we're being, than the forces that are decohering our human intelligence and communal, nature. We can't get rid of the tech, but we can redeploy it.
Yeah. I guess I'm getting a little lost in the weeds because my point of bringing up that sort of game theory, war-like strategy games that seem to, just come back over and over again with different variations.
Yeah, by the way, just what's amazing about that, and please keep, don't lose your train of thought, but that's a perfect example of a thrisp, right? It just keeps producing new forms of the same thrisp.
Right.
Each one that grabs the nervous system a little more, it ratchets its grip on the nervous system a little more tightly. That's the whole goal.
So that's self-replicating. So hold that in one hand. In the other hand, we're also talking about there is a group of people, who are taking advantage of these holes in people's understanding of their own consciousness, and they are manipulating them somewhere in the lines of testing to see how much it works, and now also just kind of in we have an agenda, we're going to use this to...
Right, so they're doing gain of function research on ways to manipulate humans, and they can do that these days extremely cheaply and unimaginably quickly. Go ahead.
And so you and I see that as a problem.
For sure.
And in the old framework, we would say that makes them an enemy. Can the idea of an enemy exist in the framework of wanting to produce more bubbles, more cooperation, more beauty, rather than resist, compete, fight?
Brilliant question. So this is the problem of the dream assassin. Because very commonly, what portends the end of dreaming is the introduction of an enemy. And we should pay very careful attention to the anciently evolved intelligences that are involved in our dreaming experience in this way. Because they can teach us what to do instead, in the same way that we can learn how to overcome the influence of the dream assassin that collapses the dreams, which isn't always the right idea, by the way. We can take cues from that learning and transfer them to, our human experience and situation in societies and with technology. So yeah, the important thing isn't to identify an enemy, right? This is why when I was posing a figure about what humans can do together to get an experience of the opposite of combat, that's very compelling, right? The goal isn't an enemy, it's a problem that we want to overcome together, right? We want to take a situation that's causing harm and suffering and transform that into a situation that results in new intelligence, new opportunities, an expansion of the opportunity space for the people that were previously suffering, and so forth. And humans are very capable of this. They do it all the time. They're just not doing it in an organized way yet. Or at least, they're not doing it large scale in an organized way.
Sorry, I was listening, but I was also having a hard time following because I was also thinking at the same time.
Okay.
It happens.
No sweat. Yeah, I do that too.
So I lost you in instead of it being an enemy, instead of that dream assassin's thing, it's sort of happening.
Yeah, it's troubleshooting and transformation.
Okay. Right. And so we're still identifying a problem.
Yeah,
but we're not treating it as an enemy. We're transmuting it into what? More beauty?
No, wait. Let me say very clearly what we're doing. So we identify a problem. That becomes an opportunity space for our own mutual relational development, liberation, and joy. Mm-hmm. Right? So we use the problem to climb the ladder of our developmental humanity, which is what we all were hoping for when we got born here.
Mm-hmm. Right? Is a chance to experience ecstasy in this form?
And also ecstasis from the prisoneering systems that are trapping and oppressing us and ratcheting down their grip on what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. If we fight those systems, they just ratchet faster.
Right. Because you're feeding it.
Yeah, exactly.
I really appreciate this conversation, and I trust our ability to pick up where we left off. But Eric, someone is calling me that needs my help. So
okay.
Can I get back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. We were talking about how vigilance, ambiguity, and prediction form a triangle that underlies most human anxiety, and if not all of it. It's hard to foment anxiety without these three pivots getting activated. And vigilance isn't just about watching things. Vigilance also has to do with being observed. And men and women, historically and presently, tend, it's not a law, it's a principle, to have different concerns about this, though both of them are seers and both of them are observed. This is why we have the idea of flexing, which is to make a display. But traditionally, the symbol of the woman in front of the mirror points up the feminine fascination with being the focus of observation. And things like sports, right, traditionally, point up the focus, the male aspect of being observed performing excellent acts, and so forth. Effectively, in the psyche, the masculine aspect tends to want to see, and the feminine aspect tends to want to be seen. Of course, there's really complex stuff here because the feminine aspect does not want to be seen in the ways it does not want to be seen. And the masculine aspect tends to, I don't actually know what the vulnerability there is. We're all vulnerable to negative observational stuff. So what I was pointing out is in a situation where someone's anxious about something and there's ambiguity. For example, we can create an example. Everything that we're anxious about is ambiguous. Let's say, the example I came up with was, I got a new cell phone and I can't connect it to the internet. And I've been trying for 3 days. I've been on the phone with tech support. They've sent me 2 new SIM cards. And it's not working. Now, I can't tell when. So there's temporal ambiguity. I can't tell when or if the problem will ever be solved. And there's also situational ambiguity, right? I need the phone to connect to the internet. I have to be able to do that. So in some cases, what happens, particularly in psychosis or schizophrenia or extreme anxiety, is that the left hemisphere will gladly, this is what I discovered when I learned these principles by observing my own family members under high stress. In many cases, and the American election is an example of this, in a situation of high ambiguity, I got to write this in my essay I just published. Wow, yeah, this is really important. In a situation of high ambiguity, left hemispheric processes in human cognition will gladly prefer to generate a crisis. They will go for pure disaster because disaster is a role we know. We know how disaster works. We know what our role is inside it. We don't know how just being human and improvising works. And this is an important pivot to introduce to the friend we were speaking about earlier. The usefulness of improvisation and just being fully human in a situation where there's high ambiguity and we feel at risk. Because normally what we will do is we will accept one of 3 roles that are familiar to us because we know how they work. And those roles are victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And those roles are very attractive because we're extremely familiar with how they are structured, how they function, and what outcomes they produce. So this is what's called the drama triangle, right? Victim, persecutor, rescuer. And people can switch roles. in a dramatic situation. The point I'm making, though, is something really trippy, which is that we will accept shitty roles because we're not comfortable with improvising or expanding our humanity. We're comfortable with what's familiar, historically and habitually, emotionally, psychologically, relationally. So people just reenact these roles over and over again instead of allowing themselves to improvise, especially if they feel threatened by the vigilance, ambiguity, prediction triangle. And it's important to encourage them to improvise. That gives them a move where they don't have one. If they realize that they're reenacting a habitual role because it's familiar, that can actually unlock the cage for them. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So now I'm going to say something even weirder. I realized when I discovered this problem with familiar roles that actors actually do something really trippy. They take a familiar structure that should be dead inside because it's just the repetition of some trope, right? Some role, right? Almost always that role is victim, persecutor, or rescuer, right? Hero. They take some familiar role, and instead of just becoming the rote structure of the role, they come to life inside it. They improvise inside the role, thus demonstrating to us the key to the cage of our own human foible of the continual enactment of a role that's dead inside. What do you think?
So you're saying they breathe life into a trope that's been used over and over again. How?
Mm-hmm. They come to life inside one of the structured roles of victim, persecutor, or rescuer that ordinarily is just a historical reenactment, right? They take a structured role and they improvise inside the lines of that role, thus making the role become inspired and alive, vitalizing it. So they're actually showing us how to do that in our own lives, and that's part of why we become fascinated with them, even though we don't know this usually.
It kind of goes back to some previous conversation about how the games we play are often domination, war-based games.
Yes.
At least, video games and board games. And so then you look at movies and, that victim, rescuer, and persecutor is the story. It's just over and over and over again.
Exactly. And when we, when you called me initially, I called you some kind of a name, and then you asked me what I was doing, and then I said something completely ridiculous that I would never do, right? And so even though it sounds like guys just doing the guy thing together, we were actually improvising within the role.
For sure.
And so when guys quote unquote shit talk to each other, that's part of what they're doing is they're doing that thing that dogs do when they wrestle, except they're doing it mostly in language. They're exchanging insults that if it were serious would cause fights, but since it's playful, it's like a bonding ritual.
It's interesting because I listened to a story, and if the story goes, Darren and Nate were taking a walk, and they had a great time, and they saw this beautiful thing, and they did this beautiful thing, and they, met a squirrel, and it was sick, and we helped it. So there's the rescuer, victim trope, yada, 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 yada. And it's basically just 30 hours of good thing after good thing. Oh, something bad thing happens. Oh, okay, here's the resolution. Good thing, good thing, good thing. Like, that's not the interesting story. The thing that makes $1 million in the movie theater is tension all the way, ambiguity. It's playing with that stress.
And by the way, it wakes up the vigilance of the viewer. Because and how does it do that? It introduces negative ambiguity, right? And then it causes them to start making predictions.
Right. And then that's the game. You can play with those predictions. You can have plot twists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. The moment you know there's a murder, you're trying to figure out who did it. Right? You're just scripted to do this. I used to go to movies with my dad when I was a kid, and this would really fuck me up. We'd be like in scene 2 of the movie. He's like, that guy killed that person. And I'm like, what? Like, he had figured out the language of drama to a degree. Like, his predictive capacities were astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought there was something metaphysical to this. I only discovered this later, after he died, actually. He thought he had a system. Maybe he did.
But, I mean, if you're playing within the confines of, like, movies and art, that's a lot. It's hard for me to feel safe projecting that out into real life experiences. Not to say that the movies and art we make isn't a reflection of daily occurrences, but I think that movies and stuff is a lot more contained than the metaphysical nature of humans.
It's true. Yeah, no, it's true, because the movie's happening in a box, literally, right? It's a literal frame. So most of reality is missing. And within that frame, it's not too hard to solve problems, but all of us get reads on humans. And we do make predictions, whether they're conscious or not, about the person's integrity, their desirability as a relational partner, all these things. And one of the things that, no, I'm not going to say that. So my dad, for example, was extremely good at reading opportunity spaces and also at reading people. He had a kind of natural flair. And part of this is because he went from a place where the ambiguity and complexity is extremely high and compressed, i.e. Brooklyn, New York, to California, right? So immediately he's a big fish playing in a small pond. In New York, right, the number of events per second, the temporal compression, the relational compression, is way higher in Brooklyn than it is anywhere in California, right? It's just... So he went from a position of really high compression where he learned his skills to a position of much lower compression. He had an advantage. He definitely had an advantage from that. And this is how New Yorkers tend to think when they come to California. I mean, I saw some lady, I was in the line at the grocery store up the street. There's like, I don't know, 8 people in line, right? This lady comes in and she's going to buy some batteries, and she just goes to the second position, the person right after the person who's being checked out at the moment. And I looked at her and I said, "Are you from New York?" She's like, "How did you know?" I was like, because only somebody from New York would think that they could just, because she's like, well, my car's parked outside. I got my blinkers on. I got to, I'm like, yeah, you're from New York. Right? She doesn't give a shit about the line. She's just like, these are a bunch of Californians. I can just manipulate the fuck out of this. Who's going to stop me? So yeah, compression matters. And what you were saying about the film is true, right? It's a small box. There's a limited number of variables, much more limited than with actual humans. But my dad and other people like you and me, if we want to, and there's sort of two major branches of this. The first is altruistic opportunism, which is something you and I are both very highly focused on, I think. And the other is manipulative, like selfish opportunism, right? And so we can certainly expand the skills we would use in the triangle of vigilance, ambiguity, prediction. When we're watching a film, we can transfer those skills to real life.
It's interesting because that altruism, it's been an interesting ride, just kind of getting into that mindset of like, it ain't all about Nathan. And realizing the relationship between when I take risks, I sacrifice my own security for the well-being of others. I'm often rewarded for that. It becomes a very interesting dance of how much should I be intellectualizing altruism versus enacting it from a place that altruism tends to pour out of, like a wellspring, which is the heart. I use love as a North Star. That's a personal word because when you tend to use love in most circles, people think they're talking about the same thing, but they're often have vastly different relationships with that word.
Sure. Like all words.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I find that when I use the intelligence of my body and these emotions of giving, care, forgiveness, not martyrism, but allowing myself to be seen as undesirable things with the recognition that there are higher truths and more beauty to come from those kind of positions, I realize that I'm playing a game that is constantly putting me in that position of uncertainty. It's constantly putting me in I have no idea. I can't not predict what's going to happen when I give away resources to people that I may never see again, or decide not to go make a bunch of money building bombs because I know that those bombs are going to go kill people and that doesn't align with my altruistic values. I give up security for, the absence of something. So all that being said, I'm rapidly becoming more and more comfortable with very little, with kind of not being able to see past my nose, but continuing to be met in life with beauty and with reciprocity. It's a fascinating journey, and I'm wondering what that stirs up in you.
Okay, so this goes back to, let's just be clear. Historically, you were experimenting with your capacity to manipulate situations. Is that not true?
Sure, mostly unconsciously.
Sure, but I think often consciously too, because you're extremely insightful, and I see you as quite intelligent in the sense of the capacity to understand variables and do what's needed to get the result you want, right? Which could be understood as cunning. You're potentially cunning.
Sure.
And what happened for you, I think, was that you underwent, and you're still in the process, you underwent a transformation in which you started to realize, wait, there's like 5 other games I could play, and if I'm after rewards, the kinds I can't expect easily are actually better than the ones I'm familiar with.
Right.
Okay. So, and similar to me, I realized early on, like, the rewards I get from random acts of altruistic experiment are much more satisfying than the ones that I get from manipulation, even though I too am capable of manipulation. So we both switched over, and here's the thing that happens. We switch from the mechanical and the...
Sorry, is that siren bothering you?
No, I can't hear it at all.
Okay.
We switched from mechanical, utilitarian evaluations of reward to risk, right? And part of how we switched was by going from rote analysis and mechanical manipulation of variables in the relation space and the opportunity space to play. This is what I was talking about earlier with the switch to improvisation from a familiar role. We don't know how it works. We don't know what the outcome is. We don't even know if we get a reward, right? It's not merely the delayed reward experiment of, can the monkey sit in front of 2 bananas for 3 hours knowing that they're going to get 5 later, or do they have to eat the bananas right now? Right? It's not just that. It's something much, much more profound, which is to play sincerely, to be authentic and vulnerable and alive and creative in a situation where other people are tending to play in a more utilitarian sense. So we learn that we can discover new features of our humanity by improvising and taking the risk of moving outside the familiar roles and outside our intellectual or opportunistic capacity to manipulate circumstances. Now look, if I'm relating with a corporation, I don't give a shit about altruism. That's not a human being. I want benefits right now.
Yeah, I think I make that mistake quite often.
Interesting that you called it a mistake. Say more.
All right, where did we leave off?
All right, so we're talking about the switch from rote or analytical, utilitarian evaluation of role and reward to improvisation, where the reward itself doesn't become the goal. What becomes the goal is something like relational integrity, experiment, play, improv, right? And that's risky because we know how to manipulate things. We're intelligent, we're insightful, we can see some variables. But what I was saying earlier is if I'm interacting with a corporation, I don't give a shit about altruism. Now, if I'm interacting with a person in an organization, I care about that person. But I want benefits because they're treating me like an object. And, as far as I'm concerned, there's no relational integrity there. And you were saying that you used to make that mistake. You called it a mistake, so I wanted to hear more about why you think that's a mistake.
Right. So, I struggle with the to steal or not to steal. I see grocery stores as incredible evil. Not I'm out standing in front of it, flipping it off, but there are people starving, and yet there's all this bountiful food just sitting here, rotting, being thrown out at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't respect the business. I don't respect the institution that it's born from. And so, if I can get away with spending less money there, I will, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Then, I have a moral crisis because I go, I don't agree with stealing. Where do I draw that line? Am I making a mistake by viewing the corporation, am I going to be punished in some way? Like what? Not by the law, but by some, karmic order,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to navigate that because it gets into the realm of the mechanics of the universe that I don't understand and what exactly divinity is and how, how are the scales and balances balanced at the end of the day? Who's keeping score?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Neither do I, but we can say something very primordial and fundamental about this. The first thing is, you didn't invent language, so did you steal language from humans?
I wouldn't say so.
There's lots of things that you didn't pay for that you received. So what's the difference between things you receive that you don't pay for and things you receive that you do pay for? Now,
I think you find that in relation.
I agree. But that's only if there's integrity in the relational manifold, which there naturally is in small human groups because of a reputation. But in broad-scale groups, that goes away. What I was going to say that I think is primordial is possess nothing. Do not take anything that is not yours ever. Neither emotionally, nor relationally, nor commercially, nor objectively. Possess nothing. Care nothing for possessions. Care about beings. Adore beings. Give whatever is asked. Ask for as little as possible. That's a primordial guideline that we can probably trust. But we live in a highly layered representational environment where there's all kinds of misbehavior going on. And so in that environment, we should have a layered, I think it's intelligent, since we live in this environment, to have a layered response. I don't know how to say this, but I'll just be blunt. I'm a thief. I've been stealing shit since I was a little kid. I tend to respect the boundaries of personal ownership as far as my thieving goes. I try not to steal from people. But part of me doesn't give a fuck about stealing from organizations because I don't believe they're people.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm navigating to. And
the primordial principle is always valid, right? The thing I said first is the thing I actually know, like I trust. And I can't... Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I can't obey it. I feel very possessive about certain objects. It's one of my character flaws.
Yeah. I don't feel possessive. I don't have necessarily a desire to own things, but I'm like slowly eking myself towards understanding the fact that I don't know if it's a fact, but there's some relationship with being fed, like being, and I mean that not just in a food way, but like being given the things that you need, and playing around with defining need and versus want. Like there's a story happening in all of our lives, and people talk a lot about alignment, with destiny and with what they're here to do in this incarnation. Like being in a body is a mission of itself, and we're here to relate in a certain way. And that's a very, very interesting like idea to me. I spend a lot of time wondering and being curious about this proposition that's been around for a long time of destiny and this incarnation being a very small part of a bigger picture in terms of like a soul. And so when that comes into play, I go, logically, why would I be here on Earth if is my job to collect the resources that are then necessary for me to do the thing I was meant to do? Or is that an illusion and I'm going to be handed the things that I need? And I realize I've collapsed the manifold quite a bit here, with a lot of, with the scenario, but it kind of gives an insight into what I'm exploring in all this altruism. It's like, when I let go, when I trust that what I need, capital N need, I trust that will be given to me, and everything else is kind of a distraction or an illusion. Things start to shift around me, and I start to become lighter and feel freer because I don't worry so much about what I possess, and I worry a lot more about my relationship to people and to just about everything. And that has only benefited me. And yet I don't, even though I've been benefited, I don't know if that's because it's a good strategy with a weird lore written around it, or if I'm tapping into some sort of, universal truth about incarnation and why we're here.
Okay, so yeah, it does. The word you used, strategy, right? That implies the utilitarian analysis of variables and situations. So It's not a strategy. And this is the difference between approaching relationships and situations analytically and the thing I was talking about earlier, right? Because the analytical rule is obviously selfish and opportunistic.
Yeah.
It's about what do I get? And weirdly, the altruistic rule, in my view, in my felt sense, is not about what do I get. It's about who do I become. It's about role.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so improvising that role, learning to be human in a situation where we are at risk, and resisting the urge to deal utilitarian in a utilitarian fashion that is, quote, pragmatic, unquote, is part of the process of becoming human. Because I think actually we are probably kind of born human with all of our potential faculties in nascent form. But what we're exposed to in human culture and when we undergo enculturation and languaging, that adds a layer that is very fucking confusing and painful to relate with. It doesn't make sense. And so many of us respond to that, and it's relatively natural to respond to that opportunistically. Well, if it's about accounting, then I'm going to get the stuff, right? Fuck those other people. This is about me. Much like
I do not want to play the accounting game. I really don't. It's so boring.
You're okay. The accounting game. Let's be really clear. The accounting game appears to be useful in an accounting sense, but it's the most expensive game you can play because you can live your life and not have a moment of being human. So that game becomes more expensive every time we play it. We have to.
I guess I'm willing to completely relinquish that game altogether and put my full faith in, this invisible force. But I obviously haven't done that because on some level I don't really believe that it's there. I just know that I'm relating with something that seems like it's there. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think I can address that very effectively.
Sure. Like when am I going to go too far with this and then completely fall through?
Mm-hmm. Here's the problem. You're actually using your accountant to try to make the determination of whether you should be free or not. Here's what I mean. You're trying to figure out whether there's some invisible force that will reward you if you're authentic.
Yeah.
Okay? And here's the thing. That's not part of the equation. Whether or not there's an invisible force that's got your back, you're still using the accountant to try to be free of the accountant. There doesn't have to be an invisible force. The same thing can be true with or without any invisible force. All it depends on is authenticity in relation. and whether you're acting within the purview of the spirit of your being. And the spirit of your being doesn't have to be metaphysical. Right? So you've established a false dichotomy. And the false dichotomy is, this only works if there's an invisible force that has my back.
Right, because otherwise what I'm doing is suicide.
No, it isn't. That's the accountant talking. It's got to be either invisible force or you're just reckless and you're going to die. That's nothing like the game that is afoot, my friend. The game that is afoot has infinite bubbles. And so as you move in the bubble space, it actually doesn't matter. First of all, your destiny, so to speak, is not determined by some pre-existing set of rules. It may be influenced by them, possibly. But you've set up a false dichotomy where either there's an invisible force that's got my back, or I'm a dead man.
Right.
That's not true. You're a living man right now, whether or not there's an invisible force. You're a being. And you're not just a man, you're a being. Right? You're an organism, you're an animal, you're a human, you're all of these things. And the big ones are huge, right? Being is infinite, organism is pretty big, animal is gigantic, human is smaller, person is very tiny in comparison. But I just want to be really clear, like, your life's an adventure. I think it's meant to be lived out of a spirit of beauty and discovery and exploration and experiment and play. If your ability to play has to depend on whether or not there's some invisible force that's got your back, as long as you're, not just doing the accounting thing, no, dude, no. That's not. There's no part of that is real. The invisible force may or may not be there. Either way, if you play well, you're going to be fine. And what you means is complex might not mean your human body.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that interests me is, like, in that exploration, I think the life beyond death, exploration has depended on that invisible force for me for a long time, because I think, okay, if this is really just a game of, play, and we somehow got confused with all this accounting stuff, then of course, then there's going to be, we're going to wake up from this dream after a while and be like, that was fun. What's next?
I think there's something really important to consider here. This is a toy. I'm not saying that this is how it is. But what if your actual life and the game that you're actually playing, which isn't entirely a game, but we'll call it that. What if your life and the game that you're playing and the thing that I called your spirit that you're learning to use to navigate your experience with as you transform from an accountant to an improviser? What if what is inspiring that improvisation is actually your death? What if your soul is the knowledge you have beyond this lifetime, attempting to influence your behavior within this lifetime? What if afterlife isn't the actually important thing? What if the after death is actually your soul's intelligence leaking back? What if your life is your death leaking back into incarnation?
Yeah, I don't even know what the fuck to do with that.
Yes, you do. You're brilliant. You're going to have no problem with this. You're going to chew on this, and you're going to be like, oh my God, that's fucking insane. Because I think, honestly, at this late phase in my life, I've lived a long time for a human, I'm starting to see that we've got this whole thing with death backwards. It's inside out. Our life is actually inspired by our death in the future. Remember I told you that I was concerned that there was an event in the future that was sending shockwaves back in time?
Mm-hmm.
what if that's what our soul is? What if our soul is the position above all our lives, and it leaks backwards in time into actual specific existences?
It certainly makes you wonder why things are the way they are.
No, it actually explains why the things are the way they are. It really does. Because everybody's got it backwards, right? They're playing the game from the wrong end of the board, right? They think, I need to preserve this separate self, and if I mess up, I'm going to get judged and it'll be destroyed. When in actuality, they have to think from death into life, not from life into after death. Your spirit is powerful. I know you. And I'm stupid about simple things, like every human is. But I can see the power of your spirit. And that shit is incredible, man. It's like really momentous. I'm not trying to build you up or blow smoke up your ass. I'm trying to encourage you to trust it. Right? I trust you. I trust your heart. And what I mean by your heart is this position above a single life. And you keep wondering if there's this force that will protect you. Man, that's the force you're made of. You're made of this thing that's above your specific life. And frankly, there's nothing really to lose but your integrity in the moment. So when you go with your integrity in the moment, it's win-win. It's bubble making. You're making bubbles. And you've seen this demonstrated to you. It's been demonstrated in conversations you and I have had directly.
For sure.
Particularly the hilarious metaphor of the sun cloud sunglasses.
The sun cloud, yeah.
Right? Like, wait, what? The thing that blocks the light? What? Are you kidding me? Oh, God. Beautiful. Fantastic.
Yeah, I have a real deep... My goal is deep presence within every moment and the understanding that I don't need to plan the future.
I mean, both things work. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. Bubble making involves lots of different kinds of bubbles, but yeah, to the degree that you don't have to plan the future, you're rich, and to the degree you have to plan it, you're poorer. Mm-hmm. And our society and our civilization is based on the inversion of that principle. No, it's all about the future, man. You got to make the money, put it in the bank. Yeah, let's go.
It's very true. I feel that.
No, I trust your soul, and you're wondering if there's some force, and what I'm trying to say is something really weird. You're misusing the thing you're wondering with, because the thing you're wondering with is the force you don't believe in. Mm-hmm. The force that hasn't proved its existence to you yet. It's the very thing that you wonder about, the existence of that with, that is the thing you're wondering about.
Dude, you keep talking, you're going to enlighten me.
I'm learning with you, man. You're shining the light of your curiosity and your existential questions on my mind, and then my mind just starts reflecting shit like some kind of water.
Yeah.
It's a mutual thing.
Our conversations are one of my favorite games that we play.
Oh, it's a beautiful game every time, man. I'm all in.
Part 2 of having to leave you. 10 minutes is my appointment. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little buffer room so I'm not just walking into this office with like existential thoughts dripping.
Yeah, it's all good.
Cool. It's been a pleasure as always. I will maintain our friendship now that I have a little more stability,
I appreciate that. Do I have your permission to post the recordings?
For sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I want other people to benefit.
Yeah.
It's my altruistic drive.
Yeah. To many more.
To your spirit, that invisible force that you've been wondering about. I love you, man. Yeah,
I love you too.
You're amazing, dude. Just keep being beautiful. You got this.
You too. You too. I'll see you in the next one.
All right. Peace.
Peace.